Hey guys, I've got exciting news to share with you. So Cartier Santos de Cartier has been relaunched. It's been re-released. Recently, I was in New York City. I actually ended up visiting Bloomingdale's and Saks Fifth Avenue. Both stores had this fragrance back. So I actually bought this particular bottle back in 2020 during the height of the pandemic, and I bought a tester. As you can see, that's the only thing I could find. I probably paid around $150 for this, so quite expensive. But it is back now. I guess Cartier has decided to re-release this men's fragrance, and it's selling for $108 at Bloomingdale's and $120 at Saks and Macy's. So I don't know why there's a price difference. I didn't notice that there was a sale at Bloomingdale's, but this is back, and I'm going to tell you all about this fragrance, when it was launched, all that good stuff. Definitely a favorite fragrance of mine, and I enjoy it, even though I don't think this is exactly identical to what was once launched as this fragrance back in 1981, because it's obviously been reformulated, neutered, and changed up from what the original smelled like. But if this is all we can get and you are into classic men's fragrances, this is definitely one that is highly recommended by me for you to try. So the only version I found was the original in Eau de Toilette, and it was launched in 1981. Perfumer for this is Daniel Moliere. I think that's how you say his name. And I would call this an aromatic woody amber fragrance. And the reason I say this for this fragrance, it starts off very aromatic herbal green. Eventually becomes very woody, and it's drying down to an ambery experience. So as I said, the price for this is $108 at Bloomingdale's, and Saks and Macy's has it for $120 for the 100 ml. I don't know what the difference in price is. And the only other thing I should say, this launched in 1981 along with a feminine fragrance from Cartier that is Must de Cartier. So this is not the original. This is the Parfum edition. But as you can see, the bottles are kind of similar. But you know what? It's interesting. It's the first time I was testing this out. I pulled it out to do this video. I'm reminded a little bit of Must de Cartier as well. And it's interesting that they both launched in the same year. Apparently, Santos de Cartier and Must de Cartier are the very first fragrances from the house. So they launched fragrances in 1981. So the notes break down for Santos de Cartier: juniper, lavender, basil, lemon verbena, bergamot, nutmeg, geranium, pepper, rosemary, vetiver, cedar, patchouli, sandalwood, amber, coconut, vanilla. So these are the notes apparently for this fragrance. And, you know, it's a classic scent. And as I was saying earlier, if you're someone that doesn't like the reformulated editions, then you're probably not going to enjoy this fragrance. I personally don't have a vintage version of this fragrance to compare to, and so I can't really judge it. It was a long time before I bought my tester in 2020 that I had actually sampled or experienced this fragrance, so I'm not remembering this fragrance whatsoever. But I personally look at it this way: if this is the only version I can get, I'm very happy with it. And it's interesting also, I reported on Van Cleef & Arpels Pour Homme and what is the other one? Van Cleef & Arpels Czar. So those two fragrances have also been relaunched, and I actually got to sample them on my travels in Paris. I went to the Van Cleef & Arpels perfume shop right next to the jewelry store, and I sampled them. They are quite pricey, and according to the sales associate there, those will get a worldwide release. So it's interesting, we are seeing the relaunch of classic men's fragrances. Are we going to see more? Again, it's a sad thing that they're not relaunching it the same way they used to be. And maybe because the fragrances get discontinued because there are ingredients that are used back in the day that are no longer allowed to be used. So they're banned ingredients. So that's the reason why a lot of these fragrances get discontinued. But I'm happy to see that they are bringing back some classic men's fragrances, and hopefully there's a market for them. Hopefully the younger generation, embraces some of these more classic fragrances and starts buying them, so that the brands do relaunch a lot of their classic fragrances over again. So if you want to watch that video with the relaunch of the Van Cleef & Arpels fragrances, It's an anticipation video, exciting that those are getting they have gotten the relaunch. But I want to see more. I want to see if brands can bring back some classic fragrances that have long been gone. But let's get back to Santos de Cartier. As I said, this was the very first Cartier men's fragrance, and it was launched along with the Must de Cartier. And I do want to say also, there was a Must de Cartier pour homme launched in the early 2000s that has long been discontinued. So there was an edition of Musk for men that came out almost 20 years after 1981 to 2020. I think it was 2000 when it launched. But that sadly is gone. It's no longer. Maybe Cartier will bring that one back as well. We're hoping. Let's see. But this is a classic offering. It does have that, smell of men's fragrances from the early 80s. So you have this very aromatic experience. It's kind of a punch in your face. It's very green and herbal. And if you like the idea of herbs, this is something that you should try. It could remind you of the fougere style of fragrances. So there is that going for it because it is quite aromatic. But as I said, it dries down to woods and an ambery experience because it has amber, it has that coconut, and also it has vanilla. But super awesome, really, really green and herbal. The herbs are really, really a punch in your face. And it's a who's who of herbs as well. It's not just one or two. There's a lot here. And the experience is like taking herbs, a bunch of them, fresh herbs, chopping them up. And that smell is really, really big. And, like it smells of the garden, the herbs that are, grown in the garden. So if you like the smell of herbs, this is definitely capturing that experience, the greenness of the herbs, their, spicy qualities and things like that are totally captured here. I almost also think that this has galbanum as a note, but they're not crediting it because there's a greenness that comes off, a bitter greenness that comes off in here that reminds me of galbanum. And also that's what's reminding me of Must de Cartier. Going to quickly smell that on camera as well. And this is the first time, whoa, this is quite dark. This is the first time I'm actually connecting Santos de Cartier to Must de Cartier. This is quite potent. It's a Parfum edition, so it's a base heavy fragrance, whereas this is quite fresh. It's an eau de toilette, so this is actually needing some time to develop, but it is quite ambery. This is also quite musky, the Must. And I'm going to come back and tell you that this is a bit musky as well. But eventually, the Must de Cartier in Parfum edition is revealing its green side. But for me, it's reminding me a little bit of Santos. But for me, it takes a while for it to remind me of that. But I feel like there's a connection between the two, especially also since the bottles are kind of similar, as you can see. But both of these are testers I bought. And with the Must de Cartier Parfum, I think it was launched in 2015. It's got a bit of a musky characteristic, there's some funk to it when I'm wearing it. And it's the same thing with this one as well. There is a slight muskiness under there, a sweaty funk that's there. And I think that's the kind of fragrances that they were developing, which also kind of reminds me a bit of a leathery effect, which they're also not crediting here for Santos de Cartier. So these are the things I get with this fragrance. And if you're into fragrances and you like fragrance history and you want to learn a little bit more about, what fragrances were created and what people were wearing, various decades, because this came right after the 70s was over. So very early in the 80s when Cartier first launched fragrances. So this is a very early 80s style of fragrances. And what was popular around this time? A year after Drakkar Noir came out, a year after Kouros, maybe Antaeus was around the same time. So these are the kind of fragrances where guys were wearing. And, Kouros being animalic, leathery, and Antaeus being kind of a leathery fragrance, animalic once again. But two different animals. Kouros was civet and Antaeus was castoreum, because castoreum is what they were using to create the leathery effect. And then, of course, Fougère for the Drakkar Noir. See, these are fragrances that I remember that are quite popular from the early 80s. And that's when this came out, when guys were wearing these very bold spicy, aromatic, a bit animalic fragrance experiences. I am happy to see this back. Only negative is it's an eau de toilette. It doesn't have the greatest longevity, and it's a designer, so I don't give credit to the designers for releasing kind of fragrances on the weak side, but sometimes they do bring back a fragrance and also bring a Parfum edition of it. For example, the Must de Cartier, the eau de toilette, which launched in the early 90s, was, brought back in 2020, once again during the pandemic, height of the pandemic. They launched the Parfum edition, and the Parfum edition does have some strength. It's louder. It's also amberier and boozy. So I'm hoping that they would do something like that with the Santos de Cartier as well, now that they brought it back. So I spoke to two associates, one at Bloomingdale's, one at Saks, and I was talking about this fragrance. Apparently, the customers have been wanting this fragrance back. So apparently there's a clientele for it. I just don't know how much. And those of you that are younger guys, do you like fragrances like this? You're an older man. I'm assuming this there's some negativity around this, because if you're still used to the original in its vintage formulation, is this one going to be a dud for you? Because for one, I don't think it's going to have the strength as the original vintage version had, because fragrances back in the early 80s are not made like the fragrances that they make these days. Fragrances in eau de toilette concentration, even cologne concentration in the early 80s lasted so long. They were so potent in comparison to the fragrances now. So all these regulations prevent fragrances from, lingering on. But that's another thing. Some people experience fragrances differently. So if you're wearing a lot of strong fragrances, the eau de toilettes might come off a very, very weak. Whereas if you hardly wear any fragrances and you spray this on, then this might come off pretty potent for you. So there is that whole idea behind the fragrances as well. But I'm just very happy that this is back. I'm hoping that they will launch a Parfum edition of this. Maybe. Who knows? We shall see. But we can wish and hope and dream. But I'm happy that the brands are relaunching some classic fragrances over again. First, it was Van Cleef & Arpels with the Pour Homme and also Czar. Now we have Santos de Cartier back. Which brand do you guys want to see in a classic fragrance, re-released again? Maybe Balenciaga will release Pour Homme. I'm hoping, now that Balenciaga has launched a ton of their fragrances. We shall see. But also, I would like to see from Balenciaga Cristobal. I have both of those in vintage form, and I would love to see them brought back. But exciting news. Let me know if you were a fan of Santos de Cartier. Do add a comment below. Were you a fan before the relaunch? Were you a fan a long time ago? Do let me know. Add a comment below. And thanks so much for watching today's video, guys. If you have any questions or comments, list below. Please like this video. Please share it. And I'll be back with more videos very soon. Have a good one. Bye-bye. One more quick update here. So now that the Must de Cartier and Parfum edition has dried down, it's reminding me a lot more of Santos de Cartier. There's differences for sure. I mean, the Santos de Cartier is way lighter than the Must de Cartier, but the Must de Cartier also has this kind of an ambery experience. It's a lot warmer, but within the amber, there's something green, and that greenness with Must is definitely reminding me of the greenness, spiciness, the herbal qualities, the aromatic touches of Santos de Cartier. So since they launched at the same time, as I was saying, there's got to be some kind of a connection between the two, and I don't know exactly what. I don't have a vintage version of Must de Cartier either. The only other version of Must I have is this gold edition, and I bought this one off of somebody. But let's quickly smell the gold edition, which I'm not too experienced, but this one's also quite red, as you can see. This one seems to be fresher, maybe a bit orangey, citrusy. And I'm not getting much of the DNA of the original. The original reminds me of the Santos de Cartier, but this gold edition does not. The gold edition says it's jasmine, vanilla, osmanthus. So it's quite fruity. But I love the DNA of Must in the original form, and of course, Santos. Anyway, thanks so much. See you later. Bye-bye.